The evening began with the kind of golden light that made everything look softer than it really was. The sun had started its slow descent, casting long ribbons of amber through the curtains, painting the dining room in shades of memory. The house smelled of jasmine, rice, and fresh coriander, the familiar perfume of home, warm, comforting, almost enough to hide the quiet tremor that hummed beneath the surface. It was her sister's engagement dinner, a night everyone had waited for, talked about, planned around. Every corner of the house seemed to glow with pride. Her mother moved between the kitchen and dining table with the precision of a woman who'd done this all her life, serving love through food, hiding worry behind smiles. Her father adjusted the flowers on the table, a little too many times, as if perfection could keep joy from slipping away. The room was filled with laughter, that bright, unfiltered kind that bubbles up from people who have no reason to doubt tomorrow. Her sister's laughter was the loudest of all, pure, easy, like sunlight through open windows. And for a while she let herself believe in that sound. She watched her sister talk animatedly with her fiancé, eyes full of promise, hands brushing in secret language. It was beautiful, the kind of happiness that almost hurt to look at. She smiled too. Of course she did. She always did. From the outside, everything looked perfect. The table glowed under the soft light. The food was arranged like a painting. The glasses caught the flicker of the candles and scattered it into little stars across the tablecloth. If someone were to walk in just then, they might have thought this was what family looked like. Harmony, pride, and celebration. But beneath the hum of conversation, she felt something quieter, a stillness, like the space before rain. It wasn't that anything was wrong. Not yet, it was just a knowing, the kind that lives under your ribs and doesn't need words. The kind that tells you change is close, even when you don't know what kind. Her mother called her name then, breaking the silence in her thoughts. "Come help with the plates," she said, though there was already more help than needed. She nodded and stood, moving through the familiar rhythm of small gestures, passing dishes, refilling glasses, checking the water jug. She'd always been the quiet backbone of evenings like this, reliable, predictable, the one who knew how to make everything look effortless. Her sister caught her eye once, laughing about something her fiancé had said, and mouthed a thank you, a small, genuine thing that made her chest tighten. That had always been their rhythm. One took the stage, the other held the curtain steady. For a moment, she allowed herself to drift into nostalgia. She remembered childhood birthdays when her mother would bake too many sweets, and her father would sit back in his chair, proud of his daughters. She remembered her sister spinning in new dresses, her hair catching the light. She remembered her own hands, always steady, always the helper. The memories came soft and heavy, like dust stirred from old photo albums. The table filled. The laughter swelled, and for a while, she could almost forget the strange silence that had been sitting quietly beside her all evening, until her father raised his glass. It wasn't unusual. He loved to toast. Every milestone had its ritual, every gathering its words. His voice carried warmth as he began, the kind that made guests lean in a little closer. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate love. Not just between two people, but the love that built this family." Applause followed. Her sister's eyes shimmered with tears. Her mother smiled, a hand on her father's shoulder. She smiled too, reflexively. It was what you did. You smiled through all the speeches, but as her father continued, something shifted. His words grew deliberate. Each one weighed a little more than the last. "We have always been proud of our daughters," he said, looking at both of them now. One who brought laughter, and one who brought strength. There it was, the quiet dividing line that had always existed, but was never spoken aloud. He went on, voice full of love, but love shaped by expectation. "And tonight, as one of them begins a new chapter, we know she'll do so with the blessings and support of her family, especially her sister, who has always given so much for others." There was a pause. A ripple of something in the air, confusion, admiration, anticipation. She couldn't quite tell. Her mother's eyes found hers across the table. Soft, proud, pleading. It was in that look that she felt it. The shift. The sense that something was about to be asked of her. Something that had been waiting, quietly, for the right moment. Her heart beat slower. Her smile stayed in place. The guests began to murmur approvingly, raising their glasses again. The candles flickered. Her sister beamed, unaware of the tremor that had started beneath the surface. For a moment, she wondered if she was imagining it, if this heaviness was just her own tiredness, her own history echoing back. But no, there was something unspoken hovering in her parents' eyes, the weight of a request, a decision, a demand wrapped in affection. The moment passed quickly, swallowed by laughter and the clinking of glasses. But it stayed with her, like the faint scent of smoke after the fire's gone out. She looked around the room once more. Her sister's joy, her mother's careful grace, her father's proud stillness, and she felt that strange mixture of love and distance again. The feeling of being surrounded, yet somehow apart. She didn't know yet what would be asked. She only knew that something had shifted, and that the night, beautiful as it was, would not end the way it began. The light flickered once, briefly dimming before returning. Someone made a joke. The room filled with laughter again, and she joined in. But deep down she felt it, the quiet tremor beneath the warmth, the invisible line between what was and what would be. Later, as she sat in the stillness of her room, the echoes of the evening settling around her like fading music, a single thought came to her. Soft, but unshakable. I never thought love could sound like a demand, but that night it did. The house she grew up in was not grand, but it held itself with a certain quiet dignity. Its walls were the soft color of old marigolds, its windows framed by curtains her mother had sewn herself. Every corner of it felt familiar. The chipped tile near the front door, the faint scent of turmeric in the wooden cabinets, the slow ticking of the living room clock that had marked every hour of her childhood. It was a home built on routines, on order, on the belief that love showed itself best when everything was done the right way. There were rules, yes, plenty of them, but none spoken with anger. They were passed down gently, like family recipes. Be respectful. Be responsible. Don't talk back. Don't disappoint. She learned them young. Her sister learned them too, but differently. Growing up, the two girls had been as close as the shadows cast by the same lamp. They played together, fought clumsily, shared secrets whispered under blankets, and dreamed aloud in the echo of each other's hopes. Their laughter often filled the small house, rolling down the hall like soft music. But even in that closeness, there was a difference, not one created by jealousy or rivalry, but by expectation. Her sister was the younger one, the one with a heart too soft for punishment. When she stumbled, people rushed to soften the fall. When she cried, arms wrapped around her quickly. She was allowed to be gentle, emotional, unsure, her mistakes forgiven before they were fully made. The narrator wasn't given that softness, not because her parents loved her less, but because they believed she could handle more. She was the elder daughter. The example, the steady one. Her mother used to say it in passing with pride. She learns fast. She understands. Her father would nod, adding, "She's responsible. We never have to worry." And she would smile, because children often accept love in whatever shape it's offered, even if it comes wrapped in duty. The house itself seemed to reinforce these quiet roles. There was the dining table, a heavy wooden thing that had seen decades of meals, arguments, decisions. It was the center of their family life, a place where choices were made without asking the daughters whether those choices fit them. The table carried the weight of tradition, and with it, the expectations placed on the narrator. Whenever something important happened, someone's job loss, someone's medical decision, someone's marriage, it was discussed at that table. And even as a child, she learned to read the signals. The way her father cleared his throat, the way her mother folded her hands, the way silence was used not as absence, but as message. Silence, in that house, was a language, a powerful one, a binding one. If she cried quietly, so no one would think she was weak. If she was angry, she swallowed it, so no one would think she was ungrateful. If she wanted something different from what her parents expected, she buried the thought, so no one would think she was difficult. Her sister could cry loudly, could express disappointment without consequence, could claim her desires without being labeled selfish. Not because she was favored, but because she was allowed softness. The narrator had been raised for strength instead. She remembered countless evenings when her sister would curl up next to their mother during thunderstorms, trembling, and their mother would stroke her hair gently. She remembered wanting to sit there too, wanting that softness, but standing still instead, hands clasped, face calm, because she had been taught that bravery meant silence. There was love in the house, deep love, but it was a practical kind, measured not in words or embraces, but in sacrifices and responsibilities. Her parents worked long hours, saved for years, argued quietly about money, and hoped fiercely for their daughters' futures. But their hopes sometimes landed heavily on her shoulders, a weight she carried without complaint. The narrator grew into someone dependable, someone who always finished what she started, someone who never caused trouble, someone who learned to put her own heart on hold so that everyone else's could keep beating steadily. She didn't resent her sister for being treated differently. If anything, she protected her even more fiercely because she understood how gentleness needed room to breathe. They shared a bond woven from childhood secrets, stolen mango slices, and midnight whispers about dreams too fragile to say aloud in daylight. Years passed in this rhythm. Birthdays celebrated modestly but with warmth. Festivals filled with bright colors and the smell of incense. School mornings rushed and predictable. Evenings quiet, save for the hum of the old ceiling fan and the clatter of pots from the kitchen. Life was steady, predictable, safe. But woven into that safety was a quiet truth. She was becoming the daughter who filled in the gaps, the one who adjusted first, the one who yielded, the one who made space for others. And little by little, without anyone noticing, she learned to make herself smaller. She remembered one afternoon in particular. She must have been 17. Her mother was in the kitchen preparing a meal, her sister humming in the living room, and her father sorting papers at the table. A university letter had arrived for her, an opportunity she had dreamed of, one that required her to move to another city. Her father scanned the letter, then placed it down gently. Her mother's eyes softened with pride, then dimmed with worry. Her sister looked confused, biting her lip. No one said she shouldn't go. No one said she should. Instead, there was silence, the kind that carried more weight than any spoken word. And in that silence, she understood what was expected of her. She folded the letter back into the envelope. She smiled. She said, "It's okay. A local college is fine." And everyone breathed out, relieved. She never told them the truth, that a small part of her broke that day. But this was the house that taught her silence, taught her sacrifice, taught her to read love not in softness, but in expectation. It wasn't a cruel home. It wasn't unloving. It was simply built on a kind of generational logic, that the older child carried the weight so the younger could fly. That obedience ensured harmony. That sacrifice was the purest form of love. And so she carried it. All of it. Year after year. Until the engagement dinner, the night when that old pattern would rise again, dressed in celebration yet sharper than ever. Sitting at that table with familiar faces and familiar smells, the old house felt close again, as if its walls had stretched across time to remind her who she had been raised to be. But she didn't know then, couldn't have known, that she was no longer that girl. That something in her had changed quietly over the years, like a seed pushing through soil, waiting for the right moment to rise. The dinner would become that moment. The toast would become the turning point. And everything her childhood had taught her would be tested in ways she had never imagined. But for now, In the warm memory of the house she grew up in, she let the nostalgia wash over her, unaware that the foundation of her identity was about to shift forever. The evening shimmered with light. Strings of fairy bulbs draped across the garden, flickering softly like trapped fireflies. Laughter floated through the air, tangled with the scent of jasmine and roasted spices. Glasses clinked, silver spoons chimed against plates, and music hummed faintly under the soft murmur of voices. It was her sister's engagement dinner, a night everyone had waited for. Her parents moved about the crowd with practiced grace, greeting guests, sharing stories, their faces bright with pride. Her sister glowed, radiant in pastel silk, eyes wide with happiness, hands trembling just enough to betray the excitement beneath her calm. It was a beautiful night, almost too beautiful. The narrator stood a little apart, smiling as she always did, blending her presence into the rhythm of the celebration. The laughter, the food, the endless congratulations, all of it should have felt comforting, familiar. But beneath the music and the warmth, something inside her felt strangely still. Maybe it was the way her father's smile held a quiet strain behind it, or how her mother's laughter seemed a little too rehearsed. Maybe it was just the way she'd learned to sense tension even when it hid behind joy. She poured herself a glass of water, feeling the condensation gather on her fingers. The chatter around her was full of plans, honeymoon destinations, wedding arrangements, guest lists. It should have been a night of beginnings. And yet, a small whisper in her heart said, something is about to end. Dinner began with a toast from her father. He stood, glass raised, voice full of warmth and authority. The crowd quieted instantly, the way they always did when he spoke. His tone carried years of dignity, of a man who had built a family through discipline and love. He started with gratitude, thanking everyone for coming, for sharing this joyous night. Then, he turned to his younger daughter, his pride visible in every word. He spoke of her as the family's light, the one who had brought joy back into the home, the reason for their celebration. And then, he looked toward the narrator. His voice softened. And none of this, he said, smiling tenderly, would have been possible without our elder daughter. Applause rippled across the room. Guests turned toward her, smiling, clapping. She smiled back, polite and calm, as she always did. Her father continued. She's been our strength, the one who never complains, who sacrifices quietly for everyone else's happiness. The applause grew louder. She nodded gently, the corners of her lips lifting. Inside, though, her stomach tightened. Her mother took his hand, adding softly, "And now, we have one more request of her. One last thing we hope she'll do for her sister. For the family." The music had faded into silence. Even the laughter seemed to hold its breath. Her mother's tone was affectionate, even proud, as if what she was about to say was an honor, a natural extension of all the narrator had already done. "She has always given so much," her mother continued, smiling toward her. "And now we're asking her to help us again, to make it possible for her sister to begin this new life without worry, to share her blessings, as she always has." The words came out wrapped in love, but inside them there was a request that would take from her something deeply personal, something she had worked years to build quietly, a piece of independence, a piece of selfhood she had never defended before. Her father nodded solemnly, echoing his wife's words. "It's what family does," he said. "We lift one another up. We all give what we can." And then they raised their glasses. "To family," they said. Applause broke again. Laughter returned. The conversation resumed. But she had stopped hearing it. The sounds blurred into a low hum, like a faraway train. Her fingers tightened around her glass until her knuckles whitened. She smiled. She had to. But her breath felt shallow. The room was filled with love, but not the kind that held her. It was a love that asked, that took, that expected. The candlelight flickered, bending shadows across the table. Her mother's eyes met hers, kind, certain, unaware of the small earthquake unfolding behind her daughter's calm expression. She nodded faintly, as if agreeing, as if understanding. Because that was what she had always done. She didn't say no, not because she wanted to say yes, but because she didn't know how not to. Her heart beat in her ears. Her chest felt heavy, as though the air itself had turned thick. The laughter around her seemed to come from another world, a world she could see but no longer feel part of. Someone clinked a spoon against a glass. Someone else told a joke. Her sister leaned into her fiancé, glowing. The photographer called out for a family picture. Everyone gathered, smiling. She smiled too. The perfect daughter. The steady one. The reliable one. And somewhere deep inside, something folded in on itself. Small, silent, and breaking. Later, she wouldn't remember the words of the toast exactly. Only the way the sound of her name had felt, like a gentle hand pressing down on her shoulder, keeping her in place. When she finally sat down, her pulse slowed. The applause had faded. Her father was laughing again. Her mother was talking to guests. Her sister was glowing, still blissfully unaware. Everything looked the same. But it wasn't. It would never be the same again. Because beneath the warmth of that evening, beneath the music and laughter, something had shifted. A thin, invisible crack spreading quietly through her heart. She didn't know yet what that crack would lead to, but she felt it. The strange weight of realization that love, when bound too tightly by duty, can start to feel like debt, and debt, no matter how lovingly spoken, still takes something from you. As she watched the candles burn lower, wax pooling like melted gold, she thought of all the times she'd been thanked for her sacrifices, as though gratitude could replace understanding. The night carried on around her, more laughter, more plans, more toasts, and she stayed there, still, her hands resting quietly on the tablecloth, her smile frozen in place, her mind somewhere else, far away, yet achingly close. When the plates were cleared and the music softened, she rose to help her mother, as she always did. She gathered glasses, folded napkins, wiped a spill no one else noticed. Her mother thanked her absently, already talking to another guest. She nodded, murmuring, "Of course." Her voice didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't water, but something in her, something small and essential, had gone quiet. Later that night, when the last guest left and the laughter had finally faded, she stood by the window, watching the garden lights flicker out one by one. The scent of jasmine still lingered in the air. For a long moment she let herself breathe. The silence was deep, almost soothing, but inside that silence a realization grew, steady, unrelenting. She had been celebrated for her giving, but she had never been seen for her wanting. And as she looked out into the dark garden, her reflection faintly visible in the glass, she whispered without sound, not to anyone, not even to herself, but to the space between memory and grief. I realized I was no longer a daughter, just a name they used to balance their dreams. When the last guest had gone and the laughter had dissolved into silence, the house felt unfamiliar. The music was off, but it still seemed to echo faintly, the kind of echo that clings to the air long after the sound itself is gone. The table was half cleared. A few candles still burned low, their wax spilling over like tired tears. Glasses stood with traces of lipstick, half-melted ice, and fingerprints. The scent of food, spices, wine, roasted meat, hung heavy, mixing with perfume and smoke. Her mother's laughter, so bright hours ago, had been replaced by her soft humming in the kitchen as she wiped counters and covered dishes. Her father was on the phone, his voice a steady hum from the living room. Something about payments, timing, next steps. Her sister and her fiancé were in the garden, still talking in low, happy tones. From where she stood, she could see them through the window. Two silhouettes under the hanging lights, their faces turned toward each other like the world had narrowed to just them. And she stood at the edge of it all. There was nothing wrong with what had happened, she told herself. It was family. Families helped each other. Families gave. Families shared. She had always known that. She had lived by it. So why did it hurt so much? Why did her chest feel tight, like something had been quietly stolen from her, and no one had noticed? She gathered the remaining glasses one by one. Each clink against the tray seemed to echo in the hollow quiet. Her hands moved mechanically. Collect, rinse, dry, repeat. The rhythm was familiar, safe even, the kind of movement that kept her from thinking too much. Her mother looked up at her. "You don't have to do all that tonight," she said softly, though she didn't stop her. "You've already done enough." That sentence, "you've already done enough," used to sound like appreciation. Tonight it sounded like a benediction before another sacrifice. She smiled faintly. "It's fine, Mama. I'm almost done." Her mother nodded, eyes warm, unaware of what that smile was hiding. When everything was finally clean, she slipped away quietly. Past the living room, past her father still talking on the phone, past her sister's laughter outside. She went to her room and closed the door behind her. The air inside was cool and still. Her bed was neatly made, her desk tidy, her lamp casting a soft yellow glow across the books she'd been reading. Self-help titles, old novels, notebooks filled with thoughts she never shared. She sat down on the edge of the bed, still in her dress, her earrings glinting faintly. For the first time all night, she let the silence in, and in that silence it came, not as anger, but as ache. A deep, quiet ache that spread through her chest. Slow and certain, she thought of her father's words. "She's been our strength." She thought of her mother's voice. "One last thing we hope she'll do for her sister." And she thought of how no one had asked her privately, quietly, if she could, if she wanted to, if she was okay. Love, she realized, had never been the problem. The problem was how invisible it could make her feel. Her family didn't mean to hurt her. They just didn't see her, not really. They saw her steadiness, her silence, her reliability, and mistook it for peace. They didn't see the tiny cracks forming behind her calm. They didn't see how she sometimes wished someone would say, "You don't always have to be the strong one." She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, and stared at her hands. They were trembling faintly, tired, restless, unsure. She remembered being younger, maybe 12 or 13, when her parents had first begun saying how mature she was. How dependable. How good she was at taking care of things. Back then, it had made her proud. Now, it felt like a life sentence she never agreed to. She walked to the window. The garden lights were off now. Only the moonlight stretched across the yard, silver and soft. Her sister and her fiancé were gone. Maybe inside, maybe gone home. The night was quiet, but her mind wasn't. She replayed the toast in her head, her father's voice, her mother's smile, the applause, her own polite nodding, each detail repeated like a memory she couldn't switch off. Then, the realization settled in. They hadn't just asked her to help. They had decided she would, because that's what she always did. Because that's who she had become in their eyes. Dependable, selfless, unquestioning, she whispered, barely audible. "I don't know who I am when I stop being what they need." The words hung in the air, fragile and heavy. She sat down again, curling her knees close. Her phone buzzed once, a message from her sister. "Thank you for everything tonight. I know you'll help make this all perfect. I love you." She stared at it for a long time. The love was real, she could feel that. Her sister wasn't cruel. None of them were. They just didn't know how much she'd already given, how much of herself she'd left behind quietly in small moments, small choices. She typed a reply. "Of course, I love you too. Sleep well," then turned the phone face down. The sound of her father's voice drifted faintly through the walls. Calm, commanding, certain. Her mother's steps moved down the hallway, then faded. She lay back, eyes open to the ceiling. The glow from the lamp fell across her face, catching the sheen of unshed tears that never quite formed. She wanted to cry, but the tears didn't come. She was too used to holding them back, so instead she breathed. Long, steady breaths, in and out, and with each breath came a small, dangerous thought, a question that had never dared to exist before tonight. What if I said no? The idea startled her. It didn't sound like rebellion. It sounded like honesty, like truth she'd buried under years of gratitude and obedience. But she couldn't say no. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Still, the question lingered, floating quietly, gently, like a feather refusing to fall. She turned off the lamp. Darkness filled the room, and the silence deepened. In that silence, she thought of her younger self again, the little girl who once believed love meant doing everything right, keeping everyone happy. She could still see that child, sitting at the same desk, practicing handwriting, proud of every gold star, every good girl whispered by her teachers and parents. No one had ever told her that good girls grow up to be women who forget how to ask for themselves. Outside, the wind rustled faintly through the trees. The house creaked. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once and went quiet again. She felt the ache settle lower, heavier. But beneath it there was something else, a strange calm. A realization that pain could also be proof of something sacred, the part of her that still wanted to be seen, not just useful. When she finally closed her eyes, sleep didn't come easily. But she didn't fight it, because for the first time, she wasn't trying to fix anything. She was just feeling it, the quiet, the ache, the truth of being the one who always gives, and finally wondering what it would mean to stop. And in that fragile moment, between exhaustion and awareness, she whispered to herself, barely a sound, but enough to fill the darkness with meaning. Maybe love shouldn't always cost so much. The next morning arrived without warning. Not with sunlight, but with that gray in-between hour, too late for night, too early for day. The kind of light that slips through curtains softly, as if afraid to disturb. She woke to that silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that hums beneath your skin, pressing down, making you aware of everything you didn't say. Her phone lay beside her on the nightstand. 2 unread messages, one from her mother. "We'll talk later, okay? Don't take things to heart. You know how families are." And one from her sister. "Love you, big sis. I hope you're not upset. Everyone's counting on you." She read both twice, then set the phone down gently. It wasn't anger she felt. Not really. It was something quieter, something lonelier, like standing in a room where everyone had left. But their voices still lingered, faint, echoing reminders of expectations she never asked for. She sat up, her hair falling across her face, the sheets creased and cool. The room smelled faintly of jasmine, the scent she'd worn the night before, now dulled, like a memory left too long in the sun. She went to the window and drew the curtain back. The city below was already awake, rickshaws moving, vendors shouting, a bicycle bell ringing. Life continued, as if nothing had happened. And maybe nothing had, at least not to anyone but her. She made tea, slowly, deliberately. The way her mother taught her. Boil, pour, steep. A ritual she'd done 1,000 times. But today it felt different. Every motion felt heavy, like it carried the weight of everything unsaid. When she sat down with the cup, the steam rose in small, curling patterns. Fragile, disappearing before they could reach the ceiling. She stared at it for a long time, and then it began. Not with tears, but with a quiet confession she didn't even know she'd been holding. "I'm tired." The words barely left her lips, but once they did, something inside her loosened. She said it again, this time a whisper. "I'm tired of being what they need." Her eyes burned, but still no tears came. Just that familiar ache behind her ribs. an ache that wasn't new, just newly acknowledged. She thought of the countless times she'd said yes without thinking. When her parents asked her to handle the bills, when her sister needed help with assignments, when relatives said, "You're the responsible one, aren't you?" And she smiled, because that's what good daughters do. Now she wondered, when had she last said yes to herself? She stood restless, moving through her apartment. Her fingers brushed across the framed photo on her shelf, the one from her sister's graduation. Everyone smiling, everyone proud, her mother's hand on her shoulder, her father beside them, her sister holding her diploma. She remembered that day, how happy she was for her sister, how proud. But also, how her mother had whispered, "Now it's your turn to do something for her. She deserves it." And she had nodded, because love meant saying yes. She'd said yes so many times. The word had stopped meaning agreement. It had become a habit, a reflex, a way of surviving peaceably in a family that valued quiet harmony over honest hearts. The clock ticked faintly. Outside, someone was selling flowers. She could hear the man's voice calling out, roses, marigolds, jasmine. Her mother's favorite scent. She closed her eyes and remembered being a little girl again, sitting cross-legged on the floor, stringing jasmine into garlands while her mother hummed old songs. The room had been filled with the smell of love. Back then, love was simple. Love was soft hands guiding hers. Love was belonging. When did it become so heavy? Her mind drifted back to the night before, the moment of silence after her parents' toast. The clink of glasses, her sister's glowing face, the way everyone smiled, proud, happy, while her heart broke quietly, invisibly. And that sentence, the one her father had said, "She's always been our strength. We know she'll do what's right for family." Those words kept replaying, not because they were cruel, they weren't, but because they were true in a way she wished they weren't. She had been their strength, their calm, their steady one, and the truth was, she didn't know who she'd be if she stopped being that. She sipped her tea. It was lukewarm now, bitter. The kind of bitterness that grows when something is overbrewed, like emotions left too long without release. She walked to her bookshelf and pulled down an old photo album. Inside, pages stuck slightly together from years of humidity and handling. There they were, birthdays, festivals, graduations, smiles everywhere, every image a portrait of happiness, of a family that looked complete. But in each one, she noticed something she hadn't before, her own posture. Always standing a little behind, always watching, always composed. Her sister, radiant and free in every picture. Her parents, proud and centered. And her, always just a little out of focus. She closed the album, holding it to her chest. That's when she realized, silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's the accumulation of everything never said. Every small compromise, every half-swallowed truth, every quiet nod that said yes when the heart whispered no. And that silence had weight, a heavy, invisible weight she'd carried so long. It had begun to shape her. She looked around her apartment. Neat, organized, peaceful. Everything exactly where it should be. Everything calm. Everything quiet. Too quiet. She sat at her desk and took out a blank sheet of paper. Not because she knew what to write, but because she needed somewhere for her thoughts to go. For a long time, the page stayed empty. Then, slowly, the words came, hesitant at first, then steady. Sometimes love feels like a room full of people who can't hear you. Sometimes it feels like giving until you forget the sound of your own voice. I don't want to disappear quietly anymore. Her handwriting trembled, but she kept going. Line after line, thought after thought. She didn't stop to make sense. She just wrote. And as she wrote, something shifted. Not the situation, that was still the same, but herself. The silence that had filled her all morning began to soften, stretch, breathe. It wasn't empty anymore. It was space. Space for truth, for grief, for her own voice to exist again. By the time she set the pen down, her eyes were wet. Not from sadness alone, from release. From the slow, trembling relief of being honest with herself, maybe for the first time. She folded the paper and slipped it into a drawer. Not as a goodbye, but as a beginning. Outside, the morning light had finally turned gold. The world was awake. And so was she, not completely, but enough to feel the shift. She poured herself another cup of tea. This time she let it cool before drinking. No rush, no pressure, because maybe healing didn't come all at once. Maybe it came quietly, like this, in the small moments when you finally stop pretending everything's fine. The silence still lingered, but it felt lighter now. Not as a burden, but as a companion, a space she could fill with her own words. When she was ready, she looked around her home, at the table, the photos, the half-written letters, and whispered softly to herself, "Maybe I've been waiting for their approval for too long. Maybe it's time I start listening to my own heart." The words didn't echo. They simply stayed, and for the first time, that was enough. Days passed in that strange hush that follows emotional storms, when nothing on the outside looks different, but everything inside feels quietly rearranged. She went to work, came home, answered messages, smiled when she had to. On the surface, life continued. But beneath it all, something new was forming. A fragile thread of self-awareness, too soft to call strength yet, but steady enough to hold on to. She wasn't angry anymore. Not even hurt in the way she had been, just clear. Clarity doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it slips in like sunlight between curtains, gentle, patient, waiting for you to notice. That morning, she found herself standing in front of the mirror, the same one she'd used since moving into her apartment. Her reflection looked familiar, but the expression in her eyes had changed. There was still tenderness there, but now a quiet resolve beneath it. She had spent her whole life saying yes. Yes to peace, yes to family, yes to being good. And for once, she was ready to see what might happen if she didn't. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't anger. It was honesty. When her mother called that afternoon, she answered softly. The voice on the other end was kind, cautious, full of that same loving authority she'd always known. There was talk of dinner, of family, of clearing the air. She agreed to come, not to fix things, but to finally tell the truth, her truth, the one she'd been keeping silent for years. That evening, the house looked the same as always, soft yellow light spilling through lace curtains, the faint smell of cumin and rice in the air, the kind of home that could make you forget pain for a moment, just by existing. Her mother greeted her with a nervous smile, as though love could erase everything unspoken. Her father, quiet as always, nodded from his chair. Her sister appeared in the doorway, radiant, hopeful, unaware of the ache beneath the calm. They sat down at the same table that had seen birthdays, arguments, and now, this. No one spoke at first. The sound of the ceiling fan hummed overhead. Her mother reached to serve her, but she stopped her gently, placing her hand over her mother's wrist. And then she spoke. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "I can't," she said, 3 words. Small, simple, but the room seemed to pause around them. Her mother blinked, unsure. "Can't what, dear?" She didn't raise her voice. She didn't explain with tears or apologies. "I can't give up my home, or my savings. I can't do what you asked that night. I'm sorry." The silence that followed felt like a lifetime. Her mother's hand withdrew slowly. Her father looked down. Her sister's smile faltered. For a moment, she almost wanted to take the words back, to fill the silence with something softer, but then she realized this silence wasn't her burden to carry anymore. So she sat with it. She let the air settle, heavy but honest. Her heart pounded, but her face remained still. And then, unexpectedly, she felt peace. Not the peace of approval, but the peace of truth. Her mother's eyes softened first. Confusion, then hurt, then something else. Understanding, maybe. Her father cleared his throat. "You've always done what's right," he said quietly. "We didn't mean to ask too much," she nodded, offering a small, tired smile. "I know." Her sister looked at her, the guilt in her eyes sharp and silent. She reached out and squeezed her hand beneath the table. No one said sorry. But they didn't have to. Not yet, because this moment wasn't about reconciliation. It was about release. Years of quiet obedience, years of yes, all condensed into a single gentle no. And that no didn't break anything. It simply shifted the weight of love, from duty back to balance. Later that night, after dishes were washed and lights were dimmed, she stood by the window of her childhood home. The same garden stretched outside, mango trees rustling in the evening wind, the faint glow of streetlights flickering through leaves. It looked smaller than she remembered. Or maybe she had grown. She thought of her mother, the woman who had loved her through discipline, who had believed silence was strength. She thought of her father, the man who had given everything, except the words that mattered. And she thought of her sister, the child she once protected, who now looked at her with the same awe she used to reserve for their parents. Generations of love, shaped by fear, expectation, and survival. How strange, she thought, that love could be both a bond and a cage. She wasn't angry at them. Not anymore. She understood now. They hadn't meant to demand her life. They had just never learned another way to ask for love. She picked up the old family photo from the cabinet. All four of them, smiling, frozen in time. For years, she'd looked at that photo and felt unseen. Tonight she looked again, and for the first time, she saw them clearly. The lines around her father's eyes, the tired curve of her mother's smile, her sister's brightness, and herself, standing just a little behind but still there. Always there. She whispered softly to the photograph, "I'm not walking away from you. I'm just walking toward myself." Then she placed the frame back on the shelf, straightened it carefully, and turned to leave. The drive home was quiet. City lights blurred past, headlights painting long streaks of gold on the pavement. For the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. She opened her window, letting the night air in. It smelled of rain and earth, alive, forgiving. Her thoughts drifted, not to the past or the pain, but to something gentler, possibility. She didn't know what the future would hold. Maybe her parents would understand. Maybe they wouldn't. But that was okay, because love, she realized, didn't require surrender. It required truth, and she had finally given it, quietly but completely. When she reached home, she took off her shoes and stood barefoot on the cool floor. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock, familiar sounds that welcomed her back into her own life. She looked around her apartment. Small, imperfect hers. In the corner, the letter she'd written days ago still sat in the drawer. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. That version of herself had found her voice, and that was enough. She brewed another cup of tea, took it to the balcony, and watched the city lights flicker below. The air was warm, soft against her skin. She exhaled deeply, letting it all out. The years of pleasing, the quiet ache, the invisible duty. It left her slowly, like smoke rising and fading into the night. And what remained was simple, beautiful stillness. She smiled to herself, not wide, not triumphant, just gently. Because sometimes, freedom doesn't roar. It doesn't break chains or shatter doors. Sometimes it just exhales, and in that quiet breath you realize you're finally home. It didn't happen all at once. Healing rarely does. It came in fragments, quiet mornings, unexpected phone calls, shared recipes over text. Small gestures that began to stitch something back together, thread by fragile thread. Weeks passed after that night. The air between her and her parents remained careful, neither tense nor easy, just full of unspoken effort. They didn't revisit the argument. They didn't speak of demands or disappointments. Instead, they talked about food, the weather, her sister's upcoming wedding details, safe, simple things. And maybe that was how healing began. Not with apologies, but with gentleness disguised as ordinary life. One Sunday morning, her sister called. "Can you come over?" she asked softly. I'm trying to practice my dance for the engagement dinner. I need help. There was a long pause before she answered. Of course, she said. It was a small thing, but it felt like an invitation back into love. When she arrived, the house was alive with the sounds she had grown up with, her mother's bangles clinking in the kitchen, her father humming along to the radio, her sister laughing from the living room. She stood at the doorway for a moment, taking it in, the soft chaos, the smell of frying onions, the warmth. For a moment she felt like a child again. Her mother looked up first. Their eyes met. There was hesitation there, then a smile, shy but real. Come inside, her mother said. You'll get sick standing there, the old words, said 1,000 times before. But today they sounded different, not like control, but care. She stepped inside. In the living room, her sister was trying to remember the steps of a traditional dance, graceful, but full of small mistakes that made it even more endearing. Don't laugh, her sister warned, half smiling, half pouting. But she did laugh, softly at first, then helplessly. Her sister joined in, then their mother from the kitchen. Even their father, pretending not to watch, let out a small chuckle when her sister tripped over her own dupatta. And just like that, the room filled with something it hadn't held in a long time. Laughter. Not the polite, careful kind that fills silence, but the deep, unguarded kind that heals it. She sat down beside her sister, still giggling, wiping a tear from her cheek. Some dancer you are, she teased. Her sister nudged her shoulder. That's why I need you. That small sentence, I need you, landed softly in her heart. Not as pressure, not as expectation, just love. And for the first time in months, maybe years, she felt like she belonged. Not as someone's duty, not as a giver or a caretaker, but simply as herself. Later, as the laughter faded and the afternoon light poured golden through the windows, her mother brought in a tray of tea. Same as always, she said, handing her a cup. Perfectly balanced, not too sweet, not too strong. She took a sip, smiling. You still remember. Her mother looked at her, and in her eyes was something wordless. Remorse, pride, maybe both. Of course I do, she whispered. No one mentioned that night. No one needed to. Because love, when real, doesn't always need words to apologize. Sometimes it just shows up. In a cup of tea, in a shared laugh, in the way someone remembers how you like things. As the sun dipped lower, her sister turned on old family songs, the ones they used to dance to as kids. They moved the furniture aside, and soon, the living room turned into a soft echo of the past. Bare feet on tile, bangles clinking, the rhythm of joy. She found herself moving too, awkward at first, then freely, her laughter joining theirs, her heart lighter with every step. In that moment, she realized something beautiful. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant remembering, without pain. When the music stopped, she caught her mother watching her from the kitchen doorway. Their eyes met again. This time there was no fear in the silence between them, only gratitude. Her mother smiled. You used to dance like that when you were little, she said softly. Even when you didn't know the steps, she laughed. I still don't. Her mother chuckled, then looked down for a moment. You were always brave. I just didn't always see it. The words hung in the air, tender, trembling, true. She wanted to respond, to say something equally deep, but her throat tightened, so instead she walked over, wrapped her arms around her mother and whispered, You see me now. And for the first time in years, her mother held her back, not as a child to be corrected, but as a woman to be cherished. That evening, as she left the house, her sister hugged her tightly. Promise you'll come tomorrow too? She said. She smiled. I will. The night air outside was cool, the streets quiet. As she walked to her car, she realized that something had shifted again. Not dramatically, but deeply. The ache was still there, but softer now, wrapped in acceptance. Love had found its way back. Not perfect, not loud, but steady, and as she drove home, her laughter, their laughter, still echoed faintly in her memory. It sounded like forgiveness. It sounded like coming home. The house was quiet now, the kind of quiet that carries years of sound within it. Echoes of footsteps, laughter, whispers, and arguments long past. She sat by the window, the soft afternoon light brushing her face, warming her shoulders like a familiar embrace. In her hand, she held the old family photo, edges frayed, colors faded, but the faces still unmistakably hers, theirs, the life they had shared. She traced the lines of the picture with her fingertip. Each smile, each glance, each small gesture captured, there carried a story she had lived, survived, and now understood. Time had changed many things. The demands, the expectations, the quiet weight of being the responsible one, all of that had shifted. Not erased, not denied, but softened, reshaped by distance, understanding, and the gentle persistence of love that never truly leaves. She thought of her sister, humming in the kitchen, the way laughter had returned to rooms once heavy with unspoken rules. She thought of her parents, their voices still tinged with the old cadence of duty, yet gentler now, more aware, more present. It was imperfect, messy, human, but it was love. She closed her eyes and let herself remember. The golden evenings of childhood, the smell of jasmine in summer, the clatter of dishes on festival mornings, the soft, steady rhythm of her father's heart in the quiet moments before sleep. All the small things she had once taken for granted now felt sacred. In those memories, she found both the ache of absence and the warmth of connection. She realized that love had never really left her. She had only been waiting for permission to hear it again in her own way. Her hand lingered on the photograph. A sigh escaped her lips, not of sorrow but of release. She whispered softly to herself, as if speaking to the years that had shaped her. I didn't lose them. I just learned to keep myself too. And in that quiet declaration, something shifted. A sense of completeness settled over her. Not triumph, not victory, but a gentle peace. She walked to the kitchen, brewed herself a cup of tea, and listened. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft breeze through the window, the faint distant laughter of neighbors in the street, all ordinary sounds. But in them, she heard the resonance of life. Ongoing, persistent, forgiving. The past no longer had the power to wound her. It had given her understanding. It had given her empathy. It had given her freedom to love, fully and without expectation. That evening, she placed the old family photo back on the shelf. Not hidden, not forgotten, but positioned in a way that felt balanced. A reminder of the love she had received, the lessons she had learned, and the self she had reclaimed. She stepped back and looked at it for a long moment. The faces were the same, but she saw them differently now. She saw love in its many forms, quiet, flawed, tender, enduring, and she realized love doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it lingers in the corners of a room, in the pause between words, in the memory of shared moments. Sometimes it waits patiently for you to recognize it again. Outside, the sky turned from gold to dusky pink. The day faded gently, carrying with it the last of her lingering doubts and old fears. She breathed deeply, letting the air fill her chest, grounding her in the present. Her home felt alive with quiet gratitude. Her heart felt light, not because the past had changed, but because she had. And in that stillness, she understood fully that love had never abandoned her. It had simply learned to be quiet. She whispered once more, a soft confession to herself and to the empty room. I hear you now. And with that, she let herself rest. The weight had lifted. The laughter, the tears, the silences, the joys, all of it had become part of her, whole. Life continued, ordinary, fragile, beautiful, and in the gentle hum of the evening, she finally felt at peace.